is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 243 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Stephanie Chandler, and we're going to be talking all about how to launch a nonfiction book. Last week's episode with Stephanie Bond, Chris Holcomb said, this was so interesting. Even though I don't write serials, it does have me looking at my scenes and chapters in a new way. I think as attention spans and free time continue to shrink, having scenes or chapters that have serial-like efficiency and urgency may be the better way to go. Also, if you're looking for a great serial, check out The Tales of the City, a series by Armistead Maupin. It started as an actual serial in the San Francisco papers in the 1970s that he later collected into books. A multi-point POV, queer as fuck soap opera that's a snapshot of queer life in the 70s. Highly recommended. Very interesting. So in personal news and updates then, I'm just going to share a link in the show notes if you are interested in kind of prequels, reader magnets, and you read queer fiction, then I'm in a group promo on BookFunnel. So you can have a look at that. And that is all I'm going to say about that. Okay, so in personal news and updates then, I am over 60k through the second book. I am more or less on track to still finish both books before New Zealand. That is my ultimate goal. And give or take a day or so, so I'll probably have to catch up those day or so's, I should just about make it as well. So the Kickstarter, the second Kickstarter that I was going to run in July, I think I'm going to have to push back until September when I'm back. But you know what? That's fine. The really important bit is to get the books done. I can't do a Kickstarter without the books anyway. And I'm in the in the vein of being kinder to myself, resting a little bit more and doing things at a more reasonable pace. I think the right thing to do is to push the Kickstarter back until I am back and just focus on getting the books done. Between now and the 20th of July, I'm going to be at the British Book Bash. So if anybody is there, I will be there. And in other news, I did have to rest this last sort of week. Last week, when I didn't do much of an intro, I was really on the brink. Since then, I discovered I'm quite deficient in magnesium, and a week of sort of a double dosage, basically, of magnesium and calcium so that I can actually absorb the magnesium, and I am more or less back to normal. Hopefully you can hear it in my voice, but I actually have been waking up feeling like myself, which is amazing because it means it wasn't ever burnout. And the rebel in me wants to go, yeah, ha ha ha, now I can just go full steam ahead again. But God, I'm just so fucking relentless. It's unbelievable. Honestly, there is a deep part of me, if I'm being totally honest, that does just want to keep running at full speed and do the Kickstarter and all the rest of it. However, I'm taking it as a sign, this magnesium deficiency, that perhaps, and I'm not saying that I agree with this statement, but that perhaps I should go a tiny bit slower. So, take that bit of information how you will, ladies and gentlemen, and friends of the podcast. But anyway, yes, so I am now feeling decidedly more myself. I also had my very first, well, not first tattoo, but I had a big tattoo, my first big tattoo, bookish one. I had a lamppost, an open book, and some letters and some kind of rays of light that are actually lines and dots, and the lines and dots are Morse code, which is pretty fucking cool. So there is a secret code embedded in that. It's not really secret at all, but anyway, I love it. It was like taking drugs. Like I was a complete space cadet by the end of the day. And then I had a huge, massive crash in the evening and was completely and utterly exhausted. So, yeah, I don't know. But I also had a sleep score of like 100. So after that, out of 100. So clearly, whatever it did hormonally was great fun and made me have a wonderful sleep. And I have to be honest, I can totally see why people get addicted to it. And yes, I did leave thinking, oh, maybe another one wouldn't hurt. We'll see. What else have I been up to? Yes, working on the book, and I have been in London 2 days this week, which was really super fun. It was nice to hang out with some author pals, and yeah, I'm very busy in the background, but also trying really hard to cut things back. I really feel like I am living a different business day these days, where I have hacked back so much of what I was doing to try and enable me to just deal with words. And then it feels good. It feels healthier. It feels calmer. I feel calmer. My stress levels have come down, although I do think some of that was the lack of magnesium, because apparently it handles a lot of processes in your body. Anyway, this is all irrelevant to writing. I am on track with the annual lessons learned. It is obviously late. I would have done it by now, but I think it's going to be a better episode for you by me taking a few extra weeks. Also because I was fucked last week energetically, and I'm full of beans this week. So it'll be fine. It's coming, and it's my favourite. Anyway, okay, I am going to leave it there. The rebel of the week this week is Eden. Eden says, as you know, I had a bit of a trek to and from Seville this year with delays, reroutements aplenty. On the way back to Cornwall, I had to go on a replacement bus for most of the way. Oh, the joys. Add to that a couple of dozen rather loud and rather drunk middle-aged football fans who immediately took umbrage with my fabulous appearance. Goodness knows that would have happened if they knew goodness knows what would have happened if they knew I was non-binary. Safe to say, I wasn't particularly looking forward to this leg of the journey. We all clambered in alongside the football squad, and some other poor souls and I took our seats. Naturally, the charming football fans were not using their indoor voices, so I quickly shoved in my headphones to listen to something better. That was when I noticed that on my phone I could connect to the bus radio via Bluetooth. Thought for a grand total of 3 milliseconds and put on my Spotify playlist called Eden's Big Gay Playlist. I started off slow with a bit of 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton, you know, something that the straights can handle, then cranked up the queer until all that was playing was The Village People, Sure, and Kim Petras for the next hour. Oh, Sasha, there are few things more delightful than watching a group of homophobic white men being forced to sit and listen to a medley of Macho Man, Believe and Throat Goat accusing each other of being the culprit. Even now, it brings a smile to my face. Me too, darling, me too. Fortunately, they all got off a couple of stops before I did, so I wasn't rumbled, and they don't live in my town, thank the gods. Oh, I love this story. It made me giggle. It's the quiet little rebellions that often, you know, that would have brought Eden a huge amount of joy, and it's brought me joy hearing it. But also, it is totally rebellious, and it did make me giggle. So thank you so much to Eden for telling us their story. Okay, if you would like to be a rebel of the week, please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. No new patrons this week, but an enormous thank you to all of my existing patrons. You guys really do mean the world to me, especially in the tumultuous year that I have had. I think this has probably been the most difficult year I've had since I've been writing, both just in a personal growth. You know, I've been doing therapy, strengths coaching, on a kind of emotional business growth, just everything growth. There's been changes, and the community has just been so fucking supportive and so understanding, and I literally couldn't be more grateful for the community that we've got and their patience. So I love you guys. Thanks. Oh God, I've put this on a public podcast. Right, now back to Dead on the Inside. Right, okay, if you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. Moving swiftly onwards, this episode is sponsored by Kobo Writing Life. Kobo's free, fast, and easy self-publishing platform. KWL was built by authors for authors, and their team of dedicated book lovers is always working hard to help you reach new readers around the world. One way to reach a new audience on Kobo is through their subscription reading service, Kobo Plus. This program has been a great success and is now available to readers in Canada, Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal, France, Italy, Australia, and New Zealand. The great thing about Kobo Plus for authors is that it reaches an entirely new audience who may be trying digital reading for the first time. The Kobo Writing Life team know how important it is that authors retain control of their books, and as such, exclusivity isn't required. Do you want to try out a book in Kobo Plus Canada but not the Netherlands? You can do that. Simply select the areas that you want to be included in the rights and distribution section of your book. If you're choosing to publish widely as an author, Kobo encourage you to make your books available to as many readers as possible. With Kobo Plus, it's a great way to gain and build an audience. Don't want to opt your books in one by one? The KWL team can bulk opt in your books if you email them at writinglife@kobo.com. If you want to learn more about KWL and Kobo Plus, check out the Kobo Writing Life podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, and find them on social. Create your free account today at kobo.com/writing life. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author podcast. Today I'm joined by Stephanie Chandler. Stephanie is the author of several books, including the Nonfiction Book Marketing and Launch Plan and the Nonfiction Book Publishing Plan. She is the CEO of the Nonfiction Authors Association, a vibrant community for writers, and the Nonfiction Writers Conference, an annual event conducted entirely online since 2010. A frequent speaker at business events and on the radio, she has been featured in Entrepreneur, Business Week, The Writer, Writer's Digest, and Wired Magazine. Hello and welcome.
Sasha, you have the best voice. I want you to record every audiobook ever.
Oh, thank you. The funny thing is, as a teen, I did do voiceover work. So I did. So, and I have actually recorded a couple of my nonfiction books in audio. I haven't done them all, but I have done a couple. I do love it. I love it.
Well, I can tell your experience. You have a wonderful voice, so you should do more of that.
Well, thank you very much. Would you like to tell everyone a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today? What was or what is your journey? How have you ended up as a nonfiction expert?
Oh, my goodness. Well, back in 2003, I quit my soul-sucking Silicon Valley job. And I opened a brick and mortar bookstore here in California. And I thought I was going to sit in the back office and write novels. Doesn't that sound like a wonderful plan?
That sounds blissful.
It does sound blissful, but it turns out I'm a terrible fiction writer. I give massive props to those of you who write fiction because it is hard. And it was devastating because, quite frankly, I spent my whole life wishing I was a writer, and you kind of think you're supposed to write, novels, right? That's just the default. And when I realized I was a terrible fiction writer, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And then I have this bookstore, and it turns out owning a bookstore is not as romantic as it sounds. It was kind of a pain. So I had these Silicon Valley friends who were commuting up like 2 hours to where I moved to see this store. And they were all saying, I wish I could quit my job. I wish I had the courage you have. So they inspired me. And my first book was a business startup guide. And I started blogging kind of before blogging was really a thing. And it led me down this path of how much I just love nonfiction because it's a chance to teach what we know. Right. And help people. I know when I want to learn something new, I go get a book about how to do it. And so anyway, I sold that stupid store. I was speaking at a lot of writers' conferences, and I was kind of frustrated by the fact that those of us who write nonfiction weren't getting a lot of attention. So I started the Nonfiction Writers Conference in 2010, all online, Sasha. And remember, Zoom wasn't around in 2010. We were dialing into teleseminar lines for
Oh,
3 days
wow.
live.
Oh, wow.
Nobody was doing this stuff. It was kind of crazy, but it worked. And then each year, our attendees would say, how do we keep in touch when this is over? And I thought, well, why don't we have a community for nonfiction? So that's what led to the Nonfiction Authors Association in 2013. And along the way, I've authored 11 nonfiction books, and I get to cultivate this community that I love. And, I'm immersed in all things writing, publishing, marketing. And by the way, I sold that stupid bookstore to one of the employees 3 years after I opened it.
That's hilarious. Are they still, is the store still open?
It survived quite a while, but when the ebook boom came on, I think they panicked and they closed the store. Because remember, we thought print books were going away. There was so much drama around that. And of
There
course, that
really
didn't
was.
happen.
No, I know.
Right? Yeah, look at your bookshelf.
Yeah, exactly. I still and this bookcase, I just unhauled about 400 books. So the fact that I still have a full bookcase should tell you something about some people's book buying habits. And this is without the several hundred ebooks or audiobooks that I have. Basically, I'm just a book whore.
I'm
really
right there with you.
Um, okay, so like you say, a lot of people come to writing assuming that they should write fiction. How do we even know if we should write nonfiction? How do we know if we have something valuable that we can teach? How do we know if we have the skills to write nonfiction? Like, it's a really different skill set to be able to teach something than to be able to make shit up.
Yeah, right. And they are two totally different talents, really. So I think for the teaching aspect of nonfiction, it's almost a calling. Like, I had actually set out to be an English teacher, and I did this kind of U-turn and ended up in the Silicon Valley. And but I'd always had this desire to do some sort of teaching. And in fact, I was a software trainer for a while. So I think if you have that desire to teach, and it was, I think it was Maya Angelou who said, what you learn, you should teach. And so I think that's lovely. And in fact, one of my very first books was how to start and run a used bookstore. There weren't many out there. And I thought, well, I did it, so I could write a book about it. So that type of thing. So if you feel called to teach something, if you feel called to help people in some way, if you've been through an experience people can relate to, of course, memoir falls into this category, right? So all of those are good reasons to want to write nonfiction, and also to give other people permission that, if fiction isn't working for you, there's other ways to do it.
So I've written, how many nonfiction books? I don't actually know. One, two, three, five nonfiction books, I think, and then 4 workbooks I think I've done. And one of the hardest things for me is getting the structure right.
Yes.
Like, that is by and away the hardest thing. And I don't write nonfiction the way that I write fiction. I write fiction like in order. I start chapter 1 and go through. I didn't used to, but I do now. Nonfiction has to come out in these chunks of like examples, or like, this is a topic, this is a point, and then I smush it together into the right order. But like, taking people from base knowledge through to the complex concept that you are conveying is really hard. What advice do you have for like either outlining or structuring your nonfiction book?
My favorite way to do it is what they call the storyboard method. This is used in Hollywood and all kinds of places. But basically, the way that I do it is I get a stack of 3x5 cards, and I write down every topic I want to cover, every real life story, every case study, every stat. Anything that's going to go in this book becomes an individual card. And I usually end up with, well over 100. And I will literally lay them out on the floor and start to put them in order. And what happens is they start to form logical chapters. And then you can see, oh, chapter 3 is heavy. I need to split that. chapter 7 is really light. I need to add some more examples to that, or maybe combine it with chapter 8. So for me as a visual person as well, I like seeing it all balance out and then putting those in order. And this is a process I don't just do in 2 hours. I mean, this is something I will spend a couple of days kind of brainstorming my topics. And then I take those cards and that becomes my outline. And I think a lot of people feel like they have to follow their outline exactly. Mine always changes, but at least it's that structure to start with.
Yeah. My outlines. Well, the funny thing is, I don't outline for nonfiction. What I do is I have research folders, which kind of sounds like what you were saying, in that like each research folder is a topic. And then I go and like write in there and then I like put them together. So I think I'm doing the same thing, just not quite in the way that you do it. I had something else to say, but now it's gone out of my brain. So let's talk about the book being done now. Like, because most of my listeners, the thing they find the hardest is the marketing. So how can we be better at marketing our nonfiction or even our fiction? Like, how can we, like, for example, be our own publicist? We often talk about marketing as indie authors, but we don't necessarily talk about the publicist end of things. So how do we even do that?
Yeah, publicity is so fickle. And even when we get publicity, like, in my bio, I was featured in Wired magazine a dozen years ago. And I was so excited when they called because they were doing a sidebar off the main cover story for the month. They put a picture of my book. They gave me my byline. It was amazing. And I saw almost no increase in book sales as a result of that. But as far as, so I always kind of want authors to set some proper expectations. And I've met authors who've been on Oprah. And if Oprah didn't hold up the book, right, and say, this is an amazing book, they didn't sell books. So publicity is fickle. However, I think authors should be doing exactly what you and I are doing now. We should be going after podcast interviews. And they're easier than ever to get. And I hear from podcasters all the time, and I'd be curious your position on this, Sasha, but podcasters tell me we need guests, pitch us topics, we send them out every Friday to our members because so many podcasts are seeking new and interesting guests to have. Is that what you find?
Yeah, so I tend to do batch work. So I will I'm in a interview point, so I've got 3 today, and I always try and keep my Wednesdays for interviews. I like to be 3 to 4 months ahead. And so there are points at which I'm always looking for people. I'm always happy to like have another one in the bank. What I will say though is that I do get an influx of really bad pitches quite a lot. And so yeah, that's the tricky thing, is wading through the pitches. So yes, I'm always interested, but like the advice that I always give is to make it as easy as possible for me. So like, tell me what you want to talk about on my show, right? Like, what is the advice or the takeaways that you're going to give my listeners? Because at the end of the day, that's the exposure, right? Is to the listeners. So yeah, like definitely on looking, but looking for the right people, if that makes sense, or the right pitch.
Totally. And we had a podcast for years. We put the pause button on it, but the pitches is the same thing. And so this is good advice for authors. Really pay attention to who you're pitching. What is their show about? And how can you serve their audience in some way? And I think that's where a lot of authors get it wrong. It's not about your book. It's about you bringing something of value to that audience.
Do you think podcasts are still useful for fiction authors?
I do, if it's the right audience. So here's my thing about fiction, Sasha. I think that it's easier to market nonfiction. I think we can all agree on that. Usually the audience is fairly obvious. But with fiction, you have to find your hook, right? Your hook in the book. What are you going to stand for? So, for example, we have a local fiction author. Her name is Cindy Sample, and she writes mysteries. She actually quit her job to write mysteries full time. And she goes around speaking about how to create your next act in life because she's kind of using her last third of her life to do what she loves. She quit her job. She's writing all the time. So find a hook. And it may not even be directly related to the book, or it might be related to where the book is set. I think of, oh gosh, author's name, Kemble Scott, based in San Francisco. His novels are set in South of Market, San Francisco. So he started a San Francisco literary journal. He started writing about lifestyle in San Francisco. The New York Times reached out, invited him to write a column about San Francisco. So find a hook, then build your audience from there and be able to provide some value.
I love that. One of the things that you talk about is why we should become a book influencer. Being an influencer is a whole ton of time and effort. And usually with slow growth, I think TikTok may be the one place where that isn't the case, but I do think that we are reaching the end of the golden age with TikTok. So I mean, is that still beneficial when we could chuck money at advertising? Like, is this a good use of our time? I don't know.
Well, and when I say influencer, expert, thought leader, they're all to me kind of the same. And actually, I don't necessarily mean social media when I say that, because I think we've been a little bit oversold on social media for book sales, right? I mean, unless there's always exceptions, but for the vast majority of authors, like you said, trying to sell books through social media is tricky. But if you take that hook in your book, maybe you write about, I was just talking to a fiction writer who lives in New York City. And I said, New York City is a huge travel destination. Like you could become the New York City, like where to go, where to stay. And that could be your hook. So you want to take that hook and become known for that, whether that's through your podcast, your blog, your social media, your video channel, whatever it is, or a combination of those things. You're not trying to appeal to everyone. You're appealing to a small group of people who are looking for the content that you're creating.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot more sense. I mean, TikTok is the reason that I'm making money. So for me, I still feel like TikTok works, but I think it is not going to work for too much longer just because one of what's going on in America, but also because they are introducing advertising. And the minute you make it a pay to play environment, the organic juice goes. So,
Yeah.
then we all have to pivot and do something else. Like you also talk about content marketing, and you've sort of talked about this thought leader influencing type role. Attention in this day and age is super scarce. We are also in this new age of like AI driven content tsunami. So does content marketing still work? Is it going to work in a year, 18 months, 2 years? Or do we think we're going to have to find some new methods? Or is that the bit that works?
I really believe content marketing isn't going away. Sure, AI is producing content, but is that great content? Right? I mean, I think AI as a tool for writers to get ideas and things like that is fabulous. But this is where we think about who does well on TikTok. You're creating your own content. You're not letting a bot do it for you. And that's true for anybody who's having any success on social media. In particular, it's usually about you and the content you're creating. And so my advice to authors is always to have at least one piece of foundational content. And by that, I mean a blog, a podcast, or video channel. And by the way, all of that drives back to your website, right? So it gives you a reason to create new content on your site, which is good for Google, for search placement. It helps you establish that expertise in whatever your subject matter is. So yeah, I don't think content marketing is going away. I think we have to get better at it. I mean, I started this back in 2003. I started content marketing, was a whole lot easier, no question. But you just have to work harder and be more focused and create good content. That's where AI can't keep up, in my opinion, so far.
Okay, I sort of like swinging back to craft, but it made me think about it. I think one of the arts of good content marketing is having a really clear voice that is different to other author voices. So, do you have any advice for a nonfiction voice? Because there's sort of that element of needing to have authority whilst also being relatable, and that sort of quirky thing that makes your voice yours. Any advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, look at the authors who are doing this well. James Clear comes to mind. He wrote Atomic Habits. He's a fabulous writer. He has one of the best email newsletters I've ever seen. It comes out every Thursday, and it's like 3 quick tips. He has over 1 million subscribers. So he's not putting hours and hours into producing long articles or content. They're quick tips. I've had friends forward them to me. And so that's really what it comes down to, is figuring out what is your voice. We're writers, right? So what makes your content interesting or different? And how can you convey that to the correct target audience? I'm a huge fan, Sasha, of niching down, right? So I think that especially in the nonfiction space, we don't want to be something to everyone. I could have started another writers conference that kind of was a general writers conference, but I found a hole and I filled it. There wasn't anything happening in the nonfiction space. So for whatever your hook in your book is or your genre is, how can you narrow that focus so that you can stand out even more?
Do you have and this is just me being nosy now, do you have like a range of nonfiction people doing like e-commerce on their website? So their website becomes their business. Like you do. What are like their any tips or advice from kind of their remit? Because I know like we can get very narrow vision on, oh, we're indie authors, so we only get advice from indie authors. But it always really interests me when we have people come into the industry, or we look out from our indie author fiction industry and look at what other people are doing, like with e-commerce or with their book selling or business around the book. Like, what cool things do you see from your
I'll give you a
community?
great example. A good friend of mine, his name is Carl Polachek, and he owned an IT business, right? They fixed computers. Well, 20 years ago, he decided he sold his business and he became a business consultant to IT companies. Now, there aren't a millions of IT companies, right? There's plenty of them, but it's not a huge industry. So guess what? He stands out as the guy who tells you how to run your IT business. He's got a massive e-commerce store. He's a self-publisher. He's published, I don't know, dozens of books. He sells recordings of his speaking engagements. He sells courses. He sells downloadable workbooks. In the tech space, they'll pay big money. He had a book at one point that was selling for $300. It was a very technical manual on how to do something technical. I don't even know what it was about, but his e-commerce has been phenomenal. And on top of that, he has corporate sponsors, right? So here he is working with technology. Guess who wants to reach his audience? Tech companies. So he gets sponsorship dollars from these tech companies when he goes out and speaks, when he was publishing a catalog and he was selling ad space in the catalog. He does custom runs of his books. So he'll put the tech company logo on the cover, let them do an intro. He charges them a $3,000 setup fee, by the way, just to set it up. And then he charges them per copy as well. And tech companies, that's what they would expect anyway.
Oh
So many
my
ways to
goodness
make
me.
money in the nonfiction space.
Yeah, this is why I feel like indie authors need to start looking outside of our industry for inspiration and business models that are working, because ultimately we as indie authors, even writing fiction, can create a business around that book that is more than just the physical, paperback, so to speak. Okay, what do you think authors get wrong when it comes to writing and launching their nonfiction books?
Target audience and lack of planning. So, I talk to authors every day, and a lot of times they have no idea who their book is for. And ideally, if you have that in mind before you write the book, it helps a whole lot. So knowing your audience, getting them clearly defined, and then figuring out how to reach them is huge. And then so many authors wait till the book is out to start marketing, and then they think, oh my gosh, this is a massive task. I'm not going to do this. And then they give up. I honestly think that's what happens to a lot of writers. We'd rather just write. But I always like to compare marketing to gardening, because not everybody loves to garden. I used to be one of those people. I hated it, but I did it. I did it begrudgingly because I like having a beautiful yard. So if you go out in your garden and you plant 3 seeds every day, over time, you have a beautiful garden. Marketing is the same thing. If you can plant 3 seeds every day, over time, those seeds add up. I mean, you were talking about doing your own publicity, send out 3 podcast pitches, right? Write a blog post, do those types of things for 30 minutes each day. And it's that accumulation of effort that starts to make things happen. Would you agree? Is that what you see?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's also compound interest on our experience. So, like a lot of us, it's that phrase, the 10-year overnight success.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
the funny thing is, I started writing 10 years ago. And it's only in the last 3 months that my business has literally exploded, like financially changed our lives. And I'm at 10 years. And it's just like, how often, like, this just feels like the thing that the payment that we have to make to the universe, if you know what I mean, right? Like the work that we have to put in. But I do think that we become experts. We understand a little bit more about our audience. We understand a little bit more about what they want and what they don't want. And we understand a little bit more about our niche. We understand a little bit more about ad copy. All these things that add up. And then all of a sudden, it just works. But we have to, pay the price of writing those books, writing the okay-ish book and this one's a little bit better. It's like okay-ish plus. And then we write, oh, this one was pretty good. Oh, that one was really good, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
What about after the launch? Because we focus quite a lot on launch. I mean, it's like in air quotes, like the launch day. It's the big deal. It's the thing that we've been waiting for forever. And like, honestly, it's like for me, I've done over 20 books now. It's like the most anticlimactic thing ever. But I don't want to piss on everyone's bonfire. But what do we do after the launch day is over? How do we keep the hype going? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, we have to keep planting those seeds. So we have to keep sending out pitches to get some in front of people. We have to keep getting book reviews and asking people for reviews, maybe do some paid price promotions. One of my favorite exercises is what I call your community of influence. And that comes back to, who do you know that can help you support your book in some way? So whenever I'm getting ready to release a book, I will sit down and go, okay, I go through my contacts, I go through my emails, I go through my social media. We forget that we know people in our space or that could reach our target audience. And we can reach out and say, hey, could you bring me in to do a lunch and learn at your company? Can you help me get booked for a speaking engagement? Could your company buy 300 copies of the book to give away to their customers or at their trade association event? Or it could be as simple as, who will write a review on Amazon for you, right? So I make a spreadsheet. I have a column called Ask. What is my ask? And I will tell you, that is super helpful and kind of creating some ongoing outreach. How can I partner with some of these folks? I obviously, like you, we have peers and friends in the industry, so that helps a whole lot. And I also always try to make things reciprocal as much as possible.
you have any advice for resilience? Because in pitching, we have to get a lot of no's before we start getting yeses. How do you cope with that? How should listeners build up their kind of tolerance to hearing no?
Gosh, it is part of the deal. And I'll tell you, because I started out pitching my books as well, and I had this folder in my desk of no's. So one day I decided to create a folder called yeses. And I put this empty folder in my desk called yeses. And I eventually got that yes.
Yeah.
So, right. And so I think it's just remembering that we have to have thick skin in this industry, because even if everything went like puppies and rainbows and your book came out and it does amazingly well, then you're going to get the troll who writes the negative review. And there's always going to be something, especially with the internet. So I would say, do your best to not focus on those things and focus on what's working.
How can we make our nonfiction book stand out? Because there is already a nonfiction book on every single topic. Well,
Right.
I say that and somebody's going, wow, there's no nonfiction book on like frog mating or whatever. I don't know. Like, I'm just making it up. But, there's pretty much a book out there on everything. How do we stand out? How do we make our nonfiction the same enough that the genre readers would want it, but different enough that we stand out?
That's where the niche comes in, right? So, I have this nonfiction book marketing and launch plan. I could have put out another book on how to market your book. There's lots of them, but I stayed in my lane. So when you carve out a lane and you're speaking to those people, there's one of the really crowded topics is leadership books, right? So what if you wrote a leadership book for, females in the tech industry, or a leadership book for people who run medical offices, right? So narrow the focus, and you might think that it's going to make it harder. You're making the audience smaller, but you're actually making it bigger, because if you're going to, look at leadership books and you manage a medical office, are you going to buy another general leadership book, or are you going to buy the one specifically speaking to you as a medical office professional? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does. Are there any other ways other than having the book, the ebook, and the audiobook that we can make money with our nonfiction?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly speaking. Speaking's a huge topic in my community, because not only do speakers sell books, even if you do it for free, you're almost guaranteed to make money from it, because at the end of a speaking engagement, you're going to sell books. And in fact, I hate book signings in bookstores. I know they're really popular with authors. That's what we want to do. But having owned a bookstore and having done book signings, I think they are miserable. I don't want to direct people to the bathroom. But if I have a speaking engagement, then I have an engaged audience. And especially if it's for the right audience. And aside from selling books, speakers get paid, right? I just signed a deal to do a paid webinar. So there's all kinds of those types of opportunities. There's corporate sponsorship. This is kind of the ultimate for any of us. My friend Melinda Emerson got Visa to pay for her book tour. They paid to send her to like 8 different cities and put the Visa logo everywhere, because Melinda has a huge audience. She talks about small business. She has a huge audience. So they bought books, they paid for her travels. It was a wonderful alliance. So if you have an audience, whether it's on social media, whether it's a large email list, whether it's high traffic websites, sponsors want access to that. And I'll tell you a quick funny one, Sasha. My buddy Rob Ledlow runs a website called backyardchickens.com. It's all about how to raise chickens in your backyard. This is a thing, right? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And they don't sell anything. There's no chicken coops or chicken feed or it's fully built around a forum where people discuss their chicken raising habits. He gets, would you believe this, over 1 million unique visitors a month.
Shut the front door. Are you kidding me?
I wish I was kidding. It's incredible. So of course, that Wiley went after him, or whoever does the dummies books had him do the chicken raising chickens for dummies book. They came to him. He makes his full-time living off the ads that are on that site, and a really good full-time living, I will add.
Oh my God. That is like,
I know.
oh
I
my
love
God.
that example, right?
Where do we even go from there?
Well, it's a niche,
That
right?
is
This is the point. There's riches in those niches.
well, that's the phrase, isn't it? Niche down to rich up.
Yes, that's right.
Amazing.
And it's true. I see it over and over again in my field. It's true.
It is. Funny enough, the thing that changed everything for me is that I started writing fantasy romance specifically for lesbians. Like, so there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's perfect. And you can own that space. I wrote a book called Own Your Niche because that's the goal. You want to own your space. And that's perfect.
100%. Are there any other kind of mistakes that writers make, maybe when they're approaching writing nonfiction, trying to create a business around the nonfiction, like anything that you think are the newbie rookie mistakes that people make?
Yeah, I see a lot of people get stuck in that sort of analysis paralysis place where, they want to do all these things, they don't know where to start. Or with the manuscript, this is a tricky one, right? When is it done? Right. And so, I think there's a saying in publishing, there's no such thing as a final draft. There's only your last draft. Right. So, and that's true for me too. Like if I can't even go back and look at my books right now because I'll want to change something on every page. Johnny Depp won't watch himself act for the same reason. So, I think at some point for me, when I know the book is ready is when I'm sick of looking at it, the manuscript, right? That's a really good sign that I've looked at it so much that I can't stand to look at it one more time. Let it go. But I know an author, he's been working on his book for over 10 years and it just came out.
No,
and
it's time to let it go.
That should not happen.
No, you have to let it go.
Yes.
Well, this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
I'll tell you, quitting my 6-figure corporate job was huge. And they all thought I had gone mad. I had this really cushy software sales gig. And I was going to open this bookstore and write novels. And of course, when I think about it now, it probably sounded absolutely crazy, but it was my best decision ever. Even though I hated the bookstore, even though I couldn't write fiction, they were all steps to get me to where I was meant to be. And maybe that's a little piece of advice to take away today too. Like even your failures are steps, right? They're pushing you, you're teaching you, they're putting you in the right direction. But I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your books, your organization, anything else that you'd like to add.
Thank you. Love to connect on LinkedIn, Stephanie Chandler, and our website, nonfictionauthorsassociation.com. We have courses, membership. We have an annual nonfictionwritersconference.com. So I really appreciate this. Was a fun conversation, Sasha. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. I appreciate your time. And of course, I appreciate all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, then you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You are listening to Stephanie Chandler, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Catherine Burnett, and we're going to be talking all about how you can be more productive. And I hope, fingers crossed, the week after it will be my annual Lessons Learned, but we shall see. Next week, for now, it is Catherine Burnett. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.